Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Steven, and this is a Northwest Small Batch Brewing. And today I want to talk to you about a little mishap I had over the weekend. I was doing a split batch of beer. And so I split my beer into two different corny kegs, and then I put spunding valves, on them for pressure release. After, say, a day, I wasn't seeing anything on the gauge. It still read 0. So I gave it another day, and at the end of the next day, like an hour before I was going to head to bed, I still saw 0 on here. And so when I went to open the freezer, I'm guessing there was like a slight change in pressure or something. This spunding valve popped off, and beer started gushering and geysering out of one of my corny kegs, hit the ceiling, and then I slammed the freezer door shut. But of course, there was already beer all over the ceiling, the walls, all over the outside of the freezer, now on the inside of the freezer. So anyway, I cleaned up the ceiling, I cleaned up the outside of the freezer. I waited until I could hear it stop gushering, opened the freezer, and here's what I found. First thing is, the spunding valves had both failed. Both of these had failed. One of them hadn't burst yet, but I could see it had failed. I'm going to show you where I think it failed so that you don't have the same problem, hopefully. But I also want to show you, these are a couple of old posts that I had. I've since replaced them with newer posts, but this is just an example. And they're older styles, so forgive me, but this would be what goes on top of your corny keg, right? And then the pop, it goes underneath, right? It comes out the top. So there's, this is a little different style, it's old, but the O-ring in the top, enough pressure had built up that for some reason the pressure release valve on the keg never gave, but this little O-ring popped and came halfway out the top of the post here, of the ball lock post. And so it was kind of bulging out, and that allowed a slight hole down into the keg, which is where the beer came gushing out. So because the spunding valves failed and didn't hold the pressure, or didn't release the pressure, or keep it at a certain pressure, the pressure just kept building and building, and I didn't see it because it wasn't really on my gauge. You couldn't see. The gauge said 0. Actually, I don't know if you can see this. This gauge says it's like at 11, and it's not even plugged into anything. So, some big failures. So there's two styles of so that's the first thing I was going to tell you. The second thing is there's two styles of spunding valves, right? This is a brand new one I haven't even tried yet, but I just bought. But I'm going to explain this, hopefully. So let me go over this, because if you're looking at buying a spunding valve, it's important to know that there are two styles, and one is not as good as the other. This is a spring style. This was my very first spunding valve. This is from Northern Brewer. So a couple of things. First of all, the way the spring valve works is you have this little, screw dial on the end, and there's a spring in it, right? And there's also a little poppet with a tiny little, like rubber piece. After I took that spring out, it's down to 0, by the way. So you put this like little valve deal in here, right? And I believe you want the part that'll seal towards the bottom. Jeez. And then you've got your spring, and then you've got your little adjustment knob, right? All right. So the first thing to check if you're maintaining these is that you check those. Make sure that piece that seals at the bottom is good. The second part you need to check, and I'm telling you, if you don't check it, you may end up having the same problem. The part that connects to your keg here has a little like screw thing. Now I could use a screwdriver, but I didn't. I should have, because this is tearing it up a little bit, but I already did this once. So this unscrews, right? The top of this just unscrews, and there is a spring in this as well, and a couple of, there's a couple different pieces here, and then I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's just a hole through the center. So sometimes, especially on this, the little O-ring can get pulled off or not be in weird shape. So that's the first thing to check, right? So you've got your normal O-ring that goes in here. And you want to make sure, I know you can't see this. It's just, I mean, you take it out the way you put it in, or you can put it on here because it's going to set on here like this, on that piece. And then you have this piece, right? This piece is what pushes through to open the keg. And then, of course, you have your spring. Well, let's put the spring on like that. It's a lot of pieces that all go together here. But sometimes the springs and stuff can get dislodged, especially the O-rings and whatnot. Anyway. So this just screws back on. So that's the first thing to check. You don't really even have to, I mean, you could change the O-ring out and stuff if you feel like it needs it, but otherwise that's it. And I'm back to 0 on the pressure gauge here. So that gets stuck and then your pressure gauge doesn't read right. That's the first thing. All right. Here, let me set this aside. This is the newer style, and it's the same as this one. This is just, I got this one because it's got a bigger dial. It's easier to read. And this one holds more pressure. Now, I would never use this much, but this says it can hold up to 40 psi. I didn't get it for that reason. I got it because this dial on this spunding valve is impossible to read. These use, instead of, now this one, the pressure is reading off the chart, which is obviously not, I'm going to loosen it, but it's obviously not even plugged into anything. So it shouldn't show anything at all. But I've never tried to take one of these apart. Now, if you're wanting to look into the science between the two different options, Kegland does have a really good video for that. So there's your spring. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's the diaphragm on the inside, right? I can actually push on it. It's kind of like one of the old school speakers like you'd have where it goes boom, boom, like with a bass. So, and that's basically how it works. And I don't think this, I don't want to break, no, it does come off. So there's this little wheel that comes off. But I don't, oh, I guess it does come out. So the whole thing, here's their diaphragm. The whole diaphragm comes out. And as soon as I pulled that out, the dial went down to 0. So that was showing weird pressure in there. So I would say if you're having issues, that's the first thing to do is pull this diaphragm out and make sure that you're not getting weird pressure in there. And then just put it all back together. And then, of course, you can do the same thing I just showed you on this side where you take it apart and check all the things. So I would just tell you that you should check this stuff. I would do it. I'm going to do it every time now before I use any of this stuff for pressure fermenting. And then keep a really close eye on stuff. If you don't see the needle moving, I would be worried that you're not getting an accurate reading. And you do not want to wait too long and have it, explode on you like mine did. Anyway, I hope that helps. 2 versions of spunding valves. One is a spring and poppet. The other one's like this is a diaphragm. You can tell because the spring and poppet usually has a little screw thing that you unwind, and that's the cheaper version. And then the more expensive version that works a little bit better, the diaphragm usually has this bow tie kind of turner on it in order to tighten and loosen. So I hope that helps. Keep an eye on your spunding valves. But otherwise, that's all I had for you. I hope that helps if you're looking at spunding valves and wondering how they work or what kind of problems you could have with them, safety. There you go. So I'll see you in probably another week for another video. Thanks for stopping by and watching me drone on about this stuff. And keep on brewing. See you soon. Cheers.